Hi, and welcome to That's Already Mysterious. Join me for an intriguing look into real-life mysteries. Who was the mad gasser of Mattoon? What was whaling at the Wilga waterhole? I'm not going to solve those mysteries, but they'll be interesting to learn about. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. Transcripts and references for all episodes can be found at that'sreadymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about deformed frogs. Our brains went, "Oh, what is this?" recalled Retta Lind, a student in the group that discovered deformed frogs in Henderson, Minnesota. It wasn't anything gross. It was more like, "This is strange. I want to see what's going on." The deformed frogs were discovered by a group of 7th graders in Henderson's Nye Pond in July of 1995. The students were led by Cindy Renitz from the Minnesota New Country School in Henderson. On that day, the children found 22 northern leopard frogs, more than half of which were missing limbs and eyes or had extra legs, no legs, or other problems. Judy Helgen was the first state scientist to inspect the pond after the children's discovery. She is now a retired biologist with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Helgen first came across deformed frogs in 1993. A boy in Granite Falls was collecting animals in his backyard when he came across 3 or 4 frogs with the same missing limb or with an extra limb. After this discovery, Helgen began monitoring the wetlands in the state. She found leaking pipelines and computer boneyards where people burned electronics at night. Both of these events would send toxins like mercury and lead into the water. In some homes, the tap water would light on fire. Helgen said of the 1995 find, "They had buckets and buckets of these horrific frogs. All of them were young because they couldn't survive long." Robert McKinnell was a biologist at the University of Minnesota, where he studied northern leopard frogs beginning in 1958. He explained that the children were not making the abnormalities up. He said they were real and abundant. He went on to say that something was wrong. Malformations typically occur in 1 to 2% of the population, so the sheer number of malformed frogs was an indicator that something unnatural was the cause. McKinnell, who has since retired, said that people were always laughing at the idea of abnormalities, but he would caution them not to laugh because what was happening to the frogs could one day happen to us. Frogs are an indicator species, or the figurative canary in a coal mine. They are a potential indicator of what may happen to humans. Upon studying the frogs, it was noted that the abnormalities occurred not just on the outside, but in the internal organs as well. The internal organs and reproductive systems of the frogs were also jumbled. Some frogs had food in their bladders. Others had translucent testes. Helgen, who wrote a book in 2012 called The Peril in the Pond: Deformed Frogs, Politics, and a Biologist's Quest, on the difficulty of identifying a singular cause of the malformations, explained, "Nobody knows the cause of a surprisingly large percentage of human defects, let alone frogs and amphibians. It gets really complicated." She explained that the problem is not limited to this area. In just Minnesota, from 1995 to 2000, almost 25,000 deformed frogs were found across 195 sites. 20 of those sites have more than the average number of deformities and were labeled abnormal sites. These sites were found in at least 54 of the 87 counties in Minnesota. The abnormalities were found across 8 different frog and toad species. The rate of malformations in some places was as high as 67%. However, the abnormalities were not limited to Minnesota. They were also found in 42 states, as well as Canada, Japan, Denmark, Italy, Russia, and every continent except for Antarctica. The United States Environmental Protection Agency and United States Geological Survey funded studies to find answers, but within a few years the funding had dried up. What was causing the malformations? There are several theories. Some believed the malformations were caused by parasites. Some parasites can be known to cause malformations in frogs. Nye Pond is surrounded by farmland, so it was believed that farming chemicals could be causing the abnormalities. It's possible that farming fertilizers could have caused a parasite bloom in the pond. Some species of tiny aquatic parasites can embed themselves into the developing tissue of tadpoles, causing them to grow additional legs. However, no parasites were found in the pond or many of the other sites. Some believe that ultraviolet rays can cause amphibian deformalities, but studies say they may not be able to penetrate deeply enough into frog eggs or skin to cause malformations. Some believe industrial pollution could be causing the malformations. Lab testing at the pond revealed the presence of herbicides like glyphosate, atrazine, and acetocholine in the water. All of these chemicals are endocrine disruptors, so could be part of the cause of the malformations. It's also possible that the abnormalities could have come from the rivers where the frogs overwinter. Helgen said, "I've always wondered if it might have been something that was banned or is no longer used." Cyanazine, sold under the brand name Bladex, was one of the most commonly used pesticides in the United States by 1990, but was banned by the EPA in 2002. It was phased out in the European Union around the same time. Could this chemical be the cause of the deformations? An Oregon field study began in 1988. It showed that the stickleback fish could be responsible for some of the missing limbs. A 2009 study showed that the frog's legs may be being eaten off. The study showed predation by dragonfly nymphs. These nymphs latch into growing tadpoles and eat their legs. They also sometimes attacked the tails and eyes. McKinnell said, "I tend to think it's chemicals, and it could be a complex mix. I'll tell you this, I wouldn't drink water from that pond, especially if I was going to have kids." Helgen explained, "There are multiple causes of deformation in frogs, and one is farm chemicals, probably the major cause, because they can cause deformities and also weaken frogs, leaving them susceptible to injury and disease." Deformed frogs are still found today, but not at the same level as in the 1990s. The population of abnormal frogs has declined since the early 2000s. A number of correlations were discovered, but no definitive cause has ever been identified. Dr. Martin Oulet, a Canadian researcher, said, "I think the answer is everything." He discovered a possible link between DNA damage and pesticides. However, he says that the vanishing wetlands are a bigger problem. What caused the frog deformities seen in Minnesota and other places in the 1990s and early 2000s? Was it pesticides, predators, or something else? What do you think? Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Thanks for listening to today's episode of That's Ready Mysterious. Join me next week for another captivating mystery.